The sun rose over the Atlantic, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, while a gentle breeze carried the salty scent of the sea into Margaret Thompson's modest kitchen. Margaret, a 62-year-old widow, stood at the counter sipping her morning tea. Her silver hair, still thick and waved naturally around her shoulders, framed a face lined with experience and quiet wisdom. She was petite, with a slender frame, and her hands, though aged, retained the precision of years spent caring for her family. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The message was from Lily, her eldest daughter. "Mom, we've booked a family vacation at the Ocean View Resort next month. We can't wait to have you with us." Margaret's heart warmed instantly. She pictured herself walking along sunlit beaches with her children and grandchildren, laughing together, sharing meals without the constant chaos of their everyday lives. For once, she would be part of a gathering designed to celebrate family rather than obligations. Margaret quickly replied, her fingers trembling slightly with excitement. "I'd love to join. Thank you, everyone." She set the phone down and allowed herself a rare moment of anticipation. She thought about the soft, creamy sand beneath her feet, the sound of waves crashing against the shore, and the scent of sunscreen mingled with the ocean air. She imagined her grandchildren running ahead of her, their laughter mingling with the gulls above. Later that afternoon, as she carefully packed her suitcase, Margaret's thoughts wandered to each of her children. Lily, 38, with her tall, athletic frame and sun-streaked blonde hair, was the self-proclaimed organizer of the family. She exuded confidence and control, always precise in her clothing and actions, but beneath that polished exterior, Margaret knew Lily could be stubborn and quick to dismiss opinions that differed from her own. Then there was Rachel, 36, petite and delicate, with chestnut curls and soft brown eyes. Rachel had a nurturing personality, but often avoided confrontation, letting others take the lead. Karen, 34, with her dark bobbed hair and sharp green eyes, possessed a quick wit and biting sarcasm that could cut through any pretense. Finally, Jason, her 40-year-old son, broad-shouldered, with a strong jaw and neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard, carried himself with a calm, authoritative demeanor. A man whose seriousness often masked the warmth he reserved for the family. Margaret's heart swelled with love for them, yet a small, unacknowledged anxiety lingered. Something subtle had shifted in the family over the past few years. They seemed busier, distracted, almost distant. But she quickly brushed the thought aside, attributing it to the chaos of life. 2 days before the trip, while Margaret was arranging toiletries in her suitcase, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Emily, her 16-year-old granddaughter, a bright-eyed girl with curly auburn hair, freckles across her nose, and a mischievous glint in her green eyes that often reminded Margaret of Karen. Emily wrote, "Grandma, don't freak out, but Lily, Rachel, Karen, and Jason have a secret chat about the vacation. They're making plans without you. I don't think they want you to join the main activities." Margaret's hands froze mid-motion. A cold spike of unease ran through her chest. She reread the message, then stared out the window at the garden behind her home, where the roses were just beginning to bloom. Her mind whirled, trying to reconcile the excitement she felt moments before with this sudden, unsettling information. Had she misread the warmth in her children's invitation? Could this truly be a trap of exclusion? A family vacation designed for everyone but her? Her eyes wandered to a photograph on the kitchen wall. Her late husband, Thomas, smiling gently at the camera, his arm around her shoulders during their 50th wedding anniversary. She drew a slow breath. "No," she whispered to herself. "I won't let fear rob me of this moment. I'll pay attention, And I'll be careful. Over the next hours, Margaret's mind became a mix of strategy and observation. She drafted mental notes of questions she might ask. Who exactly had access to the main suite reservations? Which activities were being planned? Was there any chance for dialogue? Or were the group chat members already decided on exclusion? Emily sent a few more screenshots of the messages. Arrangements for spa appointments, beach games, and dinners, all seemingly coordinated to minimize Margaret's participation. As Margaret prepared her luggage that evening, she reflected on her own history. She had spent decades tending to her family, managing budgets, arranging meals, driving children to school, consoling broken hearts, and quietly sacrificing her own comfort. Her small house was filled with photographs of graduations, birthdays, and holidays, proof of a lifetime devoted to others. Yet this message from Emily served as a stark reminder. Devotion did not always guarantee inclusion or appreciation. Margaret resolved to maintain her excitement while exercising caution. She meticulously packed her favorite clothes, soft linen dresses for beach walks, light sweaters for evenings, and a wide-brimmed sun hat she had purchased the summer she turned 60, a reminder of small joys still reserved for herself. She placed carefully folded notes in her bag with reminders to observe, record, and stay attentive throughout the vacation. That night, before sleep claimed her, Margaret sat in her bedroom chair, staring at the glow of her bedside lamp. She imagined the upcoming days, the scent of sunscreen mixing with ocean air, the warmth of the sun on her face, the sound of waves mingling with laughter. But she also imagined the hidden currents, the whispered discussions, the strategies she might uncover, the moments of subtle exclusion she had to watch for. A mix of excitement and tension pulsed through her veins. She knew she had to be alert, that this vacation might not be the idyllic reunion she had dreamed of. Yet Margaret felt a quiet determination rising within her. Years of careful observation, gentle guidance, and maternal intuition had honed her ability to read people. She could sense intentions beyond words and detect truths hidden behind smiles. Emily's screenshots had confirmed her suspicions, but Margaret was ready. She would participate fully in the vacation, enjoy moments with her grandchildren, and maintain a vigilant awareness of her children's actions. The next morning, the sky was clear, the sun reflecting off the ocean like liquid gold. Margaret packed the last items, double-checked reservations, and made notes for herself. She reminded herself to breathe, to savor each moment, and to hold on to her sense of dignity and purpose. This trip would be a test not only of family bonds, but of her own resilience, perception, and ability to protect herself from emotional harm. Margaret stepped into her car, Emily at her side, her bright eyes filled with curiosity and anticipation. The road ahead stretched toward the coast, gleaming under the early sun, a symbol of both opportunity and uncertainty. Margaret knew one thing: she would be present, watchful, and prepared for whatever her children's intentions might be. For the first time, the family vacation would be approached on her terms, with her awareness as both guardian and observer. As the car merged onto the highway, Margaret felt a curious blend of hope and wariness. She was about to enter a space designed for leisure and joy, yet beneath it lay subtle power plays and hidden motives. Still, Margaret allowed herself a small smile. She was ready to embrace the sunshine, the sand, and the laughter, all while keeping a keen eye on the dynamics around her. By the time they arrived at the Ocean View Resort, Margaret had mapped out her first plan of observation. Emily held her hand tightly, whispering excitedly about the beach and pool, but Margaret's mind was alert. She knew that within this perfect invitation lay the first hints of conflict, waiting to reveal the true character of her children and their intentions. Margaret took a deep breath as they stepped into the lobby. The grandeur of the resort, with its polished marble floors, cascading water features, and sunlit atriums, felt almost surreal. She straightened her posture, lifted her chin, and walked in as a grandmother who had spent a lifetime giving and was now ready to see the world through her own eyes, on her own terms. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the gauzy curtains of Margaret Thompson's guest room, casting golden patterns on the hardwood floor. A warm breeze carried the faint scent of the ocean into the room, but Margaret hardly noticed. Her mind was entirely occupied, buzzing with suspicion and unease. She sat at the small desk by the window, the hum of the resort around her muted by her concentration. Margaret's eyes scanned her phone for the third time in 10 minutes. Emily, her 16-year-old granddaughter, had become her unexpected confidant. Emily's messages arrived in quick succession: screenshots of group chats, emails, and even a shared calendar of planned activities. The images revealed a hidden layer of deceit Margaret had never imagined existed within her own family. Her heart tightened with each revelation. It became clear. Her children, Lily, Rachel, Karen, and Jason, had orchestrated the entire trip so that Margaret would pay for the lavish vacation. Then, once the expenses were settled, they planned to dispute the charges with the bank. Margaret pressed her hands to her chest and leaned back in the chair. Betrayal settled in like a heavy fog, obscuring the excitement she had felt just days ago. How could those she had nurtured, cared for, and sacrificed for all her life plan such a thing behind her back? She opened the first email Emily had forwarded. The subject line read, "Mom won't notice. We'll cover the spa and suites later." The email detailed room bookings, spa reservations, and dinner arrangements, each annotated with comments like, "Grandma will assume she's paying for everything." Margaret's stomach churned as she read line after line. The reality of their manipulation hit her like icy water. The people she trusted most were conspiring against her, reducing her to a mere wallet for their enjoyment. Margaret's thoughts wandered to each child in turn. Lily, the eldest, had always taken charge of family finances. Her tall, lean frame, straight blonde hair, and sharp blue eyes gave her an air of confidence, sometimes bordering on arrogance. Margaret remembered the last time she had tried to suggest a different approach to budgeting. Lily's lips had tightened, her jaw stiffened, and she had dismissed Margaret's advice with a curt smile. Rachel, gentle and petite, with soft brown curls and kind eyes, had been more passive in the planning, but had clearly played a supporting role. Karen, ever the sharp observer, with her dark hair and piercing green eyes, contributed strategic suggestions and sarcastic commentary, meant to amuse but subtly exclude Margaret. Jason, her only son, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and a neatly trimmed beard, had added a veneer of calm authority to the scheme, masking his complicity with a tone of reason and logic that had convinced the others it was safe. Margaret felt a pang of grief mingled with anger. These were her children. She had raised them, tended to their wounds, celebrated their triumphs, and forgave countless mistakes. And yet, they had plotted deceit, thinking her naive enough to remain unaware. She closed her eyes and drew a long breath. She had been blindsided, yes, but she also realized she now had clarity. This betrayal, as painful as it was, had awakened something deep within her. Resolve. Emily, sensing Margaret's distress, sent another series of screenshots. They showed a private group chat labeled "Vacation Plans, Adults Only," filled with messages about keeping Grandma occupied, minimizing costs, and how to divide payments unfairly. Emily's words accompanied the images. "Grandma, I couldn't let them do this. I've saved everything for you. Don't let them get away with it. Margaret's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Despite the betrayal, she was not alone. Emily's loyalty offered a small but powerful light in the murky web of deception. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. This trip would no longer be a passive vacation where she unknowingly funded her own exclusion. She would be vigilant, observant, and strategic. The games her children thought they were playing would now be visible under her careful watch. Margaret's thoughts drifted momentarily to the physical space of the resort. The Ocean View Resort was a grand display of modern luxury. Expansive suites with glass walls overlooking the sea, infinity pools glinting in the sun, and pathways lined with fragrant tropical flowers. Normally, she would have been thrilled at such opulence, but today, every detail seemed like a backdrop to a stage on which her children's duplicity would be revealed. She opened the next set of screenshots. Dinner reservations, spa appointments, beach games. They had divided her family into clusters to ensure she would remain uninvolved. Every tactic was calculated, every plan deliberate. Margaret's chest tightened. The realization of how methodical they were made her pulse race. She recalled the countless times she had bent over backward for each of them, and now she understood that her generosity had been exploited. But alongside the betrayal, Margaret recognized something she had underestimated: her own insight. Decades of observing her children, understanding their tendencies, reading their subtle expressions, and noticing their small, telling gestures had honed her perception. She now saw patterns in the messages and arrangements that the others likely assumed she would overlook. Each manipulation, each sly plan, each dismissive remark could now be anticipated, countered, and recorded. As she sipped her tea, Margaret considered the role of her grandchildren. Emily, perceptive and loyal, had already become her secret ally. Then there was Oliver, her 10-year-old grandson, with tousled brown hair, energetic hazel eyes, and an insatiable curiosity that often got him into mischief. He was the first child she had noticed observing the adults carefully, like a little detective. His role might be small for now, but Margaret made a mental note to watch him closely. Children, after all, could become unexpected allies. Margaret began constructing a mental strategy. She would continue to participate in the trip, maintain a pleasant demeanor, and gather information. She would ensure her presence was undeniable, her voice respected, and her perspective acknowledged. Most importantly, she would verify every financial transaction, reservation, and interaction, documenting any evidence of deceit. The realization settled into her mind. She had the power to act, to confront, and perhaps even reclaim the respect and fairness that had been denied to her. Evening approached, and the resort's dining area glowed under soft lanterns. Margaret observed her children from a distance, noting Lily's confident but impatient gestures, Rachel's quiet compliance, Karen's subtle smirks, and Jason's calm but calculating demeanor. Each of them seemed unaware that Margaret had full access to the hidden truths. Their laughter, their casual coordination, even their seemingly innocent teasing, now took on a sinister tint. Margaret felt a mix of sadness and clarity. She had loved them unconditionally, but love without awareness had left her vulnerable. As night fell, Margaret retreated to her suite, Emily close by. They spread out all the messages, emails, and screenshots across the table, organizing evidence meticulously. Margaret's mind worked like a chessboard, planning moves, anticipating reactions, and calculating possibilities. Emily occasionally offered insights, her youthful perspective surprisingly sharp, pointing out inconsistencies that Margaret might have overlooked. Together, they became a quiet, formidable team, ready to navigate the subtle treacheries of a family she had once assumed she understood fully. By the time the moon cast its silver glow over the ocean, Margaret felt a strange mixture of exhaustion, anger, and anticipation. She had confronted a reality she had hoped never to see, yet she had also found a quiet strength. She was aware now of the hidden betrayal, but she was no longer a passive observer. She had the evidence, the ally, and the clarity to act decisively when the time came. This vacation, she realized, was no longer about leisure. It was about reclaiming awareness, asserting dignity, and preparing for the moment when truths could no longer remain hidden. Margaret sipped the last of her tea, closing her eyes for a brief moment. The ocean's rhythmic waves seemed to echo her resolve. Emily sat beside her, eyes bright and determined. The young girl's loyalty fortified Margaret's own courage. Whatever her children planned, whatever deceit they employed, Margaret knew she could navigate it. She would watch, she would wait, and she would act when the moment demanded. As sleep approached, Margaret allowed herself a small, private thought. Perhaps betrayal had uncovered something more vital than any planned vacation. The realization that she was no longer merely a mother or grandmother to be exploited, but a perceptive, capable woman whose awareness and resilience could not be underestimated. The early morning sun gleamed across the ocean, casting a golden shimmer on the resort's glass facades and white sands, while a faint breeze carried the salty tang of the sea. Margaret Thompson sat at her balcony table, her coffee cooling beside her, and felt an unusual thrill of anticipation. The sense of betrayal she had uncovered the day before had evolved overnight into clarity, and clarity had given birth to purpose. Margaret's mind worked quickly, assessing the resources at her disposal. First, she would secure the financial front. She reached for her phone and dialed the bank, feeling a twinge of nervous energy. On the line, a young banker named Clara Reynolds answered. Clara, in her late 20s, had a professional yet approachable demeanor, with dark hair pulled into a neat bun, soft brown eyes, and a voice that carried both competence and calm reassurance. Margaret explained the situation, detailing the potential fraudulent dispute her children might attempt. Clara listened intently, taking notes and confirming that a fraud alert would be placed on Margaret's credit card and all transactions would be closely monitored. The feeling of control grew within Margaret, a long-lost sense of authority that was intoxicating. Next, she contacted the resort manager, Henry Caldwell, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s, with sharp features softened by a practiced, welcoming smile. His brown hair was flecked with silver at the temples, and his eyes held a combination of warmth and keen attentiveness. Henry listened as Margaret explained her request. A formal document stating she alone was responsible for payment, along with complete authority over all 5 booked suites. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, adjusting his cufflinks, "we can absolutely provide a written confirmation. It's unusual, but within our policies. You will have full control over who stays and who leaves." Margaret felt her chest swell. The power she had once only imagined was now tangible, documented, and enforceable. Margaret paused for a moment, thinking of the legal angle. She picked up the phone once more and dialed Samuel Drake, her late husband's former attorney. A dignified man in his 70s with salt and pepper hair, a thin mustache, and a reputation for meticulous attention to detail. Samuel had a gentle yet commanding presence, the kind that made people feel their affairs were in capable hands. Margaret explained the situation carefully, emphasizing her desire to protect her rights and ensure the family could not manipulate her financially. Samuel assured her that he would prepare a sworn affidavit. guiding her step by step on how to safeguard her interests. He reminded her of the importance of documentation and clear, irrefutable evidence. Margaret listened, absorbing every instruction, feeling the layers of fear and hesitation dissolve. With the practical arrangements underway, Margaret turned her focus inward to strategy and psychology. She reflected on the patterns she had observed in her children: Lily's commanding presence and tendency to dominate decisions, Rachel's tendency to be agreeable but quietly manipulative, Karen's sharp wit and talent for organizing covert plans, and Jason's ability to mask his intentions with calm logic. She began imagining potential scenarios, how they might react if she confronted them, or if she exercised control over the reservation. Each possibility played out in her mind, and she adjusted her strategy accordingly, careful to remain composed and calculated. Margaret's thoughts drifted briefly to Emily, her granddaughter, whose loyalty had been unwavering. Emily's observant green eyes and fiery red hair mirrored her courage and cleverness. Margaret realized Emily was not only a witness, but also a potential partner in ensuring the plan succeeded. They would monitor every move, gather evidence, and if necessary, act decisively. Margaret allowed herself a small smile. She had never felt so connected to her own agency in years. By mid-morning, Margaret had drafted a plan in meticulous detail. She listed contingencies, timed actions, and potential obstacles. She visualized herself walking through the resort, a composed, dignified figure whose authority was undeniable. Her internal monologue replayed conversations from the previous day, noting which words had betrayed weakness or confusion in her children. She decided she would not act hastily. She would wait until the timing was perfect. Lunch approached, and Margaret walked through the resort gardens, observing her children from a distance. Lily, tall and always impeccably dressed, was busy arranging chairs and coordinating activities with an air of assertive energy. Rachel, soft-featured with her chestnut curls, appeared engaged in polite conversation, but avoided eye contact with Margaret, betraying discomfort. Karen, with her dark green eyes and lean frame, hovered near Jason, her elder brother, whispering in his ear, planning details Margaret could now discern from her strategic observations. Jason, broad-shouldered and serious, watched the group with a composed, calculating expression, completely unaware that Margaret knew their hidden agenda. Margaret's attention returned to the practical. She had confirmed with the bank and the resort, and Samuel Drake would finalize the legal documents. Each layer of security she built reinforced her newfound autonomy. She allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in decades, a deep, unshakable sense of freedom. This freedom was not reckless. It was deliberate, thoughtful, and fortified with the power of preparation. In the late afternoon, Margaret and Emily returned to their suite. The sun dipped lower, painting the room in amber tones. They laid out the documents from the bank, the resort, and Samuel Drake on the desk. Margaret reviewed every line, every clause, ensuring that her control over the reservation was unequivocal. Emily, sitting cross-legged on the floor, offered observations and reminders, noting small inconsistencies or potential loopholes. Their collaboration became a quiet, focused ritual, each reinforcing the other's confidence and determination. Margaret's thoughts wandered to her feelings. She had always been a caregiver, a protector, a woman who placed her family's happiness above her own. But now, for the first time in decades, she felt the thrill of reclaiming agency. It was not vindictive, it was principled. She had the right to protect herself, to assert control, and to ensure that betrayal would not go unchallenged. She felt a sense of exhilaration as the possibilities unfolded in her mind. Night fell over the resort, and the soft sound of waves mingled with the distant laughter and chatter of other guests. Margaret sat by the balcony, reviewing her plan one last time. She imagined the moment when she might have to act, the precise timing of accessing authority over the reservations, the potential reactions of her children, and the quiet satisfaction of reclaiming respect and fairness. She realized that for the first time in years, she was not simply a participant in her family's life, but a force to be reckoned with. Finally, Margaret closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, the warm breeze brushing her face. Emily curled up beside her, eyes shining with determination and trust. Margaret allowed herself a moment of reflection. This chapter of betrayal had revealed not only the deceit of others, but also the untapped power within herself. She had prepared, strategized, and positioned herself to reclaim control, not just over finances and reservations, but over the respect she deserved. For the first time in decades, she felt ready to act. The sun rose over the resort, the sky painted with streaks of coral and gold, casting sparkling reflections across the turquoise waves. Margaret Thompson sipped her morning coffee on the balcony, the warm sea breeze brushing her silver-streaked brown hair, her eyes calm yet vigilant. Today was the day she would put all her preparations into motion. The previous nights of planning had left her with a mixture of anticipation and quiet satisfaction. The betrayal she had uncovered was no longer abstract, it was tangible, and the time to act had arrived. Below, the resort hummed with life. Jason Thompson, her only son, tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair beginning to gray at the temples, laughed with his children in the pool. He had always been composed, rational, and careful, traits that had allowed him to mask manipulation and ambition. Jason's face, usually calm and confident, betrayed faint tension as he played Marco, his 10-year-old son, and little Sophie, 7, in the water. The children, oblivious to the family tension, shrieked and splashed with pure joy. Margaret felt a pang of bittersweet affection, but quickly redirected her thoughts to the plan ahead. Under the large white umbrella near the pool, Lily Thompson, 38, Margaret's eldest daughter, sipped a bright cocktail with practiced elegance. Her tall, slim figure, perfectly styled blonde hair, and sharp green eyes radiated authority and charm. She had always been ambitious, controlling, and charismatic, often masking subtle manipulation behind a cheerful exterior. Beside her, Rachel Thompson, 36, her second daughter, petite with curly chestnut hair and soft features, smiled warmly but nervously, revealing her habit of appeasing while quietly scheming. They chatted, laughing lightly, unaware that Margaret was observing them with calculated attention, her mind tracing the intricate web of their intentions. Karen Thompson, the youngest daughter at 34, with angular features, short dark bob, and hazel eyes that flickered with humor and cunning alike, leaned against the railing, conversing with friends from the resort. Her laughter, melodic and carefree, contrasted sharply with the undercurrent of betrayal Margaret had uncovered. The scene, vibrant and almost idyllic, stirred a strange mixture of nostalgia and resolve in Margaret. She recognized the family she had nurtured, yet she knew their duplicity, their covert plotting, and she understood the moment for truth had come. Margaret rose from the balcony, smoothing her beige linen dress, her movements deliberate, calm, and precise. Emily, her 15-year-old granddaughter, stood beside her, red curls catching the morning light, emerald eyes alert and watchful. Emily's presence grounded Margaret, a reminder that loyalty and honesty still existed in her family. "Are you ready, Grandma?" Emily asked softly. Margaret nodded, a serene expression masking the tension and determination that bubbled beneath. Today, control, would shift, and Margaret would assert the authority she had painstakingly secured. At precisely 10 a.m., Margaret sent the command via the resort's secure system. The key cards to 4 of the 5 reserved suites, those assigned to Jason, Lily, Rachel, and Karen, became instantly deactivated. Margaret felt a thrill of quiet triumph. It was not cruelty. It was justice, precise and unavoidable. From her vantage point on the balcony, she watched the ripple of confusion spread across the pool area. Jason was the first to notice. He called out to his children, then glanced toward the resort entrance where staff were visible, attempting to approach his suite. "Where's our room? Marco, Sophie, have you packed your bags?" His voice, usually composed, carried a strain of urgency now. The children's laughter faded into concerned murmurs. Margaret's heart ached for their innocence, yet she reminded herself that this was not their fault. Their parents had orchestrated the betrayal. Lily's sharp green eyes widened as she realized her card would not unlock the suite. She stood abruptly, the umbrella trembling slightly as she gestured toward Rachel. "Something's wrong?" she said, her voice tight, controlled panic beginning to seep through the polish of her usual demeanor. Rachel's soft features tightened. She bit her lip, a habit revealing the stress beneath her calm exterior. "It has to be a mistake," she whispered, looking toward the approaching staff. Karen, sensing the unusual tension, approached the elevator with brisk steps, her hazel eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of assistance or explanation. She carried herself with her habitual mix of confidence and charm, but now the lines of worry around her mouth betrayed a rare vulnerability. Margaret observed all this silently, a calm observer watching the repercussions of preparation unfold. From the balcony, Emily sent rapid messages to Margaret, her fingers flying across the screen. "Grandma, Jason is at reception. Lily and Rachel are arguing with a desk clerk. Karen is calling someone on her phone, looks panicked." Margaret read, her expression unmoved, her inner monologue steady. "Everything is proceeding exactly as planned. Timing is perfect. Responses are predictable." By 10:30, resort staff, composed and professional, began interacting with the confused family. Henry Caldwell, the resort manager, appeared near the reception desk, his presence commanding yet courteous. He approached Jason first, hands gesturing with calm authority. "Sir, it appears there has been a modification to your reservation," he explained gently, brown eyes meeting Jason's with a mixture of empathy and professionalism. Jason's jaw tightened. "Modification? This isn't possible. I booked these rooms." Margaret could see his composure fraying, a familiar controlled rationality now tinged with disbelief. The staff then turned to Lily, Rachel, and Karen, explaining the technical deactivation and subsequent access restrictions. Each face registered a cocktail of emotions: shock, frustration, panic, and a dawning understanding of the consequences. Margaret felt the quiet satisfaction of justice meted out methodically. This was not revenge, it was accountability, and it was inescapable. The scene shifted as the family converged near the reception area, trying to reconcile their expectations with the reality. Jason, standing tall but visibly strained, spoke urgently to Henry. "This must be a mistake. My mother didn't authorize anything like this." Henry maintained professional calm. "Madam Thompson has full authority over the reservation, sir. We are following the instructions as confirmed in our written agreement." The weight of truth began to settle on Jason's shoulders, an unyielding pressure he could neither dismiss nor countermand. Margaret remained on the balcony, watching, listening, feeling a mix of empathy and resolution. She recalled decades of caregiving, of sacrifices made for ungrateful hands, and she allowed herself a subtle but deep sense of liberation. Emily, sitting quietly beside her, mirrored her grandmother's focus, her youthful face lined with concern, yet radiating trust. They were witnesses to the consequences, prepared to face them together. As the hour progressed, tensions escalated. Phone calls were made, staff explanations repeated, and the family grappled with the reality of restricted access. Lily's usual poise cracked into short, clipped sentences. Rachel's attempts to soothe her sisters and brother fell flat, her voice wavering with anxiety. Karen's attempts to assert control externally only amplified the sense of confusion. Margaret's gaze softened as she observed these familiar faces, now vulnerable, recognizing that their manipulation had finally been disrupted. By 11:02 a.m., Margaret felt a calm certainty envelop her. The power she had gained through careful planning, legal authority, and bank coordination was real and undeniable. Her children had assumed she would be a passive participant in the deception, that her decades of care and love would make her pliable. They had underestimated her, and now they faced the consequences of that misjudgment. Margaret sipped her coffee one last time, letting the breeze carry away any lingering tension. Emily nudged her gently. "Grandma, they're panicking." Margaret smiled, quiet and serene. "Yes, dear, but only for the truth to be recognized, only for justice to take its rightful course." Below, the family struggled with the immediate effects, unaware that Margaret was not just enforcing control over rooms and access, but reclaiming respect and recognition she had long been denied. The afternoon sun poured through the large windows of the resort lobby, scattering golden reflections across polished marble floors. Margaret Thompson stood near the glass doors, a quiet yet commanding presence, her silver-streaked brown hair neatly pinned back, deep brown eyes scanning the entrance for the approaching family. The air smelled faintly of salt and sunscreen, mingled with the subtle aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the cafe corner. Today was the day she would confront the ones she had once trusted most. Through the revolving doors appeared Jason Thompson, tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair flecked with gray, sharp jawline tense with anticipation. His dark brown eyes flicked nervously between the reception desk and his siblings. He had always been meticulous, a perfectionist in both business and family affairs, but the weight of deception he had so carefully orchestrated was now visible in the tight lines around his mouth. Beside him, his children Marco and Sophie, oblivious to the tension, clutched each other's hands, their youthful energy muted by the serious atmosphere. Following Jason were Lily Thompson and Rachel Thompson. Lily, 38, tall and elegant, blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, green eyes flashing with a combination of indignation and disbelief, had always carried herself with an air of control and subtle authority. She moved with deliberate grace, though now her perfectly composed exterior cracked under the stress of imminent exposure. Rachel, 36, petite, curly chestnut hair framing a soft face, had always been the peacemaker of the sisters, warm yet cunning. Her wide hazel eyes now reflected panic, betraying a nervousness she normally concealed behind a polite smile. At the end, Karen Thompson, 34, angular features, short dark bob framing sharp hazel eyes, moved with brisk, purposeful steps, a habitual mix of humor and assertiveness now tempered by concern. Her shoulders squared as she approached, revealing the tension she felt in trying to maintain composure. Margaret observed them silently, every detail recorded. The shifting weight of their stances, the fidgeting hands, the fleeting glances exchanged. She felt a calm surge of control, a stark contrast to the chaos she anticipated in the next moments. Margaret's heart swelled with a complex blend of emotions: sadness for what the family had become, pride for the granddaughter who had revealed the truth, and a quiet satisfaction that finally, justice could be enacted. Beside her, Emily, her 15-year-old granddaughter, red curls catching the sunlight, emerald eyes alert and unwavering, stood ready. Emily had been the silent observer, the secret ally who had collected and conveyed the evidence Margaret now held in her hands. Jason was the first to speak, voice controlled, yet trembling slightly. "Mom, Margaret, what is going on? Why are we being told about changes we didn't make?" His usually commanding tone cracked under stress, revealing a vulnerability Margaret had not expected to witness in her adult son. Margaret's lips curved in a faint, deliberate smile. "Jason, this isn't about mistakes or misunderstandings. This is about truth, transparency, and accountability. I know everything." She lifted her phone, showing the compiled screenshots and messages, her eyes meeting Jason's steadily, unwavering. Lily gasped audibly, green eyes widening as she realized the evidence was irrefutable. You've seen?" Her voice shook with a combination of fear and outrage. Rachel's soft voice attempted a soothing tone. "Lily, let's not jump to conclusions. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation." But even she faltered, unable to mask the growing panic in her expression. Karen's sharp hazel eyes narrowed, her voice firm. "Explain, Margaret. What are you implying?" Margaret's gaze swept over the three women and her son, calm, deliberate, a storm of emotions contained in poised serenity. "I am implying that all the planning, all the manipulation to avoid paying for this vacation, the secret group chats, the bank disputes, it stops now, and the consequences are real." Emily stepped forward, her young face etched with determination and clarity, a mirror of Margaret's resolve. "Mom, Lily, Rachel, Aunt Karen, I saw everything. I've been showing Grandma the messages you sent and the plans you made to make her pay for the trip while trying to avoid responsibility." Her voice, firm yet tinged with adolescent gravity, cut through the room, leaving the adults momentarily speechless. Margaret felt a swell of pride. Emily's courage, honesty, and perceptiveness were undeniable, a beacon of integrity amid the storm of deceit. Lily's usual poise faltered further, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Emily, you shouldn't have," she began, but Emily interrupted with quiet authority. "I had to. Grandma deserves to know the truth." Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line, her attempt at diplomacy failing under the undeniable evidence presented. Karen's stance stiffened, but her hands twitched nervously, betraying the growing realization of their exposure. Margaret's voice, calm but filled with authority, continued. "Here are your options. You can take your belongings, the staff has already prepared everything, and leave this resort. You may find alternative accommodation, or you may face further consequences. The choice is yours. But understand this is no longer a negotiation." Jason's jaw tightened, eyes darting between Margaret and Emily. "This is extreme. You can't just, this is our family." His voice rose, the strain of suppressed guilt, fear, and anger all palpable. Margaret's heart softened momentarily, yet she held firm. "Jason, you have already chosen this path. You have acted in ways that demonstrated you do not respect me, that you believed your deceit would remain hidden. I am merely enforcing the truth." Lily's green eyes filled with tears, anger, and humiliation mingling. "You can't abandon us. We're your children." Margaret met her gaze steadily. "You abandoned me first, Lily. You treated my trust as weakness, my generosity as opportunity. Today, you are seeing the consequences." Rachel's soft voice shook. "But what about the kids? They don't understand." Margaret's eyes softened as she glanced at Marco and Sophie, clutching each other, unsure and frightened. They are innocent. They are not being punished. But you, adults, must face the reality of your choices. Emily held Margaret's hand lightly, her presence a steadying force. Karen's tone became sharp, her fingers tapping against her hip. Fine, we'll leave. But this isn't over. Margaret smiled faintly, calm as ever. Is that a threat or a promise? She asked, stepping closer. Because understand this, these actions have consequences, and they are irreversible. Jason looked down, frustration and helplessness etched into his features. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it, realizing that no words could undo the exposure. Lily and Rachel stood frozen, their carefully constructed defenses shattered. Karen's posture straightened, but her eyes betrayed uncertainty and fear. Margaret felt the quiet satisfaction of resolution. Control had shifted, and the truth reigned. Emily glanced at her grandmother, curiosity and admiration shining in her emerald eyes. Margaret knelt slightly to meet her gaze. Thank you, Emily. Today, you helped restore honesty and respect. Never forget that standing by truth, even when difficult, is a strength. Emily nodded solemnly, feeling the weight and significance of the day settle within her. Margaret straightened, smoothing her linen dress, her posture regal and unshakable. She looked once more at her children, her eyes soft but firm. Your rooms are no longer accessible. Your belongings are with the staff. You may find other arrangements, but know that I will not compromise my dignity or my values. This is the line. Silence filled the lobby, heavy and palpable. The family's usual chatter, their claims of entitlement, had evaporated under the gravity of revealed deceit. The sunlight glinted off the marble floors, and Margaret felt a rare sense of freedom, a profound empowerment that had been absent for decades. She and Emily exchanged a small, quiet smile. Outside, the waves crashed gently against the shore, indifferent to the turmoil unfolding inside. It was a symbolic reminder that life, like the sea, moved forward, cleansing, renewing, and offering new beginnings. Margaret took a deep breath. Today, justice had been served, not through anger or revenge, but through courage, planning, and unwavering adherence to truth. Emily, her steadfast granddaughter, was at her side, a testament to loyalty and integrity. And for the first time in years, Margaret felt entirely in control, entirely justified, and ready to embrace the serenity and dignity she had long deserved. The early morning breeze carried the scent of salt and warm sand through the boutique hotel's open terrace, sunlight reflecting off the calm waves. Margaret Thompson tightened the strap of her canvas tote, feeling a mixture of anticipation and liberation as she glanced at the car waiting outside. Beside her, Emily, still in her pajamas but tidy and alert, bounced lightly on the balls of her feet, curls catching the golden light, emerald eyes shining with a mix of excitement and nervous curiosity. Margaret, a 62-year-old widow with a slender frame and graceful posture, brown hair streaked with silver, dressed simply in a linen dress, exuded quiet authority. Her face, lined with years of care and struggle, now held an expression of calm determination. For decades, she had placed others' desires above her own, forgiving betrayals and accommodating manipulations. Yet today marked a turning point. The warm breeze seemed to mirror her newfound freedom, whispering promises of independence and peace. The taxi driver, a middle-aged man named Carlos, stocky, tanned, with a friendly round face and salt and pepper hair, greeted them warmly. His casual demeanor contrasted the tension that lingered in Margaret's chest, a gentle reminder that life continued beyond familial conflicts. "Good morning, ladies. Off to the seaside boutique, right? He asked, loading their luggage with careful hands. Margaret nodded, her eyes briefly flicking to Emily, who was examining the hotel lobby one last time, her gaze sharp despite her youth. As they drove through the coastal streets, the sound of waves occasionally blending with distant seagulls, Margaret spoke softly. Emily, remember today and what we've done. It's about more than this trip. It's about standing for yourself, understanding your worth, and knowing when to enforce boundaries. Emily nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson as if each word were a stone placed in the foundation of her character. Emily, though only 15, carried herself with surprising poise. Petite but sturdy, her red curls bouncing as she shifted in her seat. She had always been perceptive, often noticing subtleties adults overlooked. Her green eyes had already witnessed deception within her family, and the confrontation at the lobby had fortified her understanding of justice and loyalty. Margaret's mentorship, gentle but firm, was shaping her granddaughter into someone who valued honesty over comfort, integrity over compliance. Margaret reflected silently on the events of the previous day. Her children, Jason, tall and broad-shouldered, Lily, elegant and composed, Rachel, soft-featured yet calculating, and Karen, sharp and assertive, had faced the consequences of their long-planned duplicity. The sting of betrayal still lingered, a mixture of sadness and vindication. She recalled Jason's tense jaw, the quiver in Lily's green eyes, Rachel's faltering attempts to mediate, and Karen's rigid stance. Their carefully constructed facades crumbling under the weight of truth. Margaret allowed herself a fleeting sense of satisfaction. The boutique hotel came into view, a charming, understated property nestled along a quiet stretch of coastline. Whitewashed walls, terracotta roof tiles, and strategically placed flowering plants gave it a welcoming, almost intimate feeling. As the taxi stopped, Margaret stepped out first, breathing deeply. The scent of salt water mixed with jasmine from nearby gardens invigorated her. Emily followed, skipping lightly down the steps, her enthusiasm infectious despite the underlying gravity of their move. Inside, they were greeted by Sophia, the hotel manager, a slender woman in her early 40s with shoulder-length dark hair and warm, intelligent brown eyes. Sophia's demeanor exuded professionalism and genuine kindness, immediately putting Margaret at ease. "Welcome," she said, her voice smooth and welcoming. "We've prepared your suite. I understand you need a peaceful retreat." Margaret smiled faintly, appreciating the rare combination of efficiency and empathy. "Yes, Sophia. Privacy and tranquility are exactly what we need." The suite was airy and elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the azure sea. Sunlight spilled across pale wooden floors, reflecting off the crisp white linens and subtle nautical decor. Margaret placed her tote down and allowed herself a rare moment to simply inhale, absorbing the serenity. Emily rushed to the balcony, pressing her small hands against the glass, eyes wide with delight as the waves danced below. Margaret watched her granddaughter and felt a swell of protective affection, coupled with profound relief. Settling into the suite, Margaret unpacked methodically, every item placed with care. Emily watched her, curiosity mingled with admiration. "Grandma, I never knew a hotel could feel like home," she murmured. Margaret chuckled softly. "It's not the hotel that matters, Emily. It's knowing you are safe, respected, and free to be yourself. That's the true luxury." Emily nodded, absorbing the wisdom. She had already begun to understand that material wealth meant nothing without integrity and self-respect. Margaret spent the afternoon giving Emily gentle lessons on responsibility, courage, and self-worth. They walked along the quiet beach, toes sinking into the cool sand. shells scattered along the shoreline. Margaret spoke of life's choices, explaining how standing up for oneself required strength, sometimes at the cost of comfort or temporary happiness. Emily listened intently, questions tumbling out between waves, crashing softly along the coast. Margaret answered each with patience, illustrating lessons from her own experiences, the betrayals, disappointments, and the moments she had finally chosen herself over the duplicity of others. Back at the old hotel, Margaret imagined her children navigating their day, bewildered and frustrated, facing the consequences they had chosen. She felt a pang of sadness for the innocence of her grandchildren, caught between the mistakes of their parents and the unfolding repercussions. Yet she knew it was necessary. Actions, whether honest or deceitful, carried consequences, and this experience would, in time, teach lessons her children might never have learned otherwise. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold, Margaret and Emily returned to the suite. The soft, warm glow of lamps complemented the fading sunlight, creating a cocoon of security and calm. Margaret brewed a cup of chamomile tea, inhaling the soothing aroma as Emily sat nearby, writing in her journal. Margaret's thoughts wandered to the future. Vacations shared freely, conversations filled with honesty, laughter unmarred by tension or betrayal. She realized that choosing freedom meant choosing herself, and, by extension, the integrity of the family she wished to nurture. They shared dinner in the suite, overlooking the tranquil sea, words gentle, laughter soft, moments unhurried. Margaret saw Emily's contented face and felt the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in decades, she experienced a vacation that belonged entirely to her, unshackled by manipulation, free from the shadows of past deceptions. Later, as they prepared for bed, Margaret reflected quietly on the lessons of recent days. Courage, honesty, and self-respect were values she had imparted through action, not merely words. Emily, attentive and thoughtful, had witnessed the embodiment of these principles and would carry them forward. Margaret felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that by choosing freedom, she had also chosen to educate the next generation in the value of integrity. The night air drifted through the open balcony doors, carrying the distant whisper of waves. Margaret stood for a moment, absorbing the tranquility. Here, in this boutique sanctuary, with Emily by her side, she felt entirely whole, entirely free. The tumult of the previous hotel, the betrayal and confrontation, now felt like a distant memory, replaced by peace, empowerment, and hope for the future. Margaret finally turned to Emily, brushing a curl behind the girl's ear. "Sleep well, Emily. Tomorrow is another day of freedom, choice, and living honestly. Remember, integrity is worth more than comfort, always." Emily smiled sleepily, eyes reflecting understanding and admiration. Margaret lowered herself into bed, a quiet, satisfied smile on her face. At last, she had claimed her vacation, her dignity, and most importantly, her freedom. The morning sun broke over the calm sea, casting a golden glow across the boutique hotel's terrace, the sound of gentle waves mingling with distant gulls. Margaret Thompson, dressed in a light blue sundress that fluttered in the warm breeze, stretched her arms and inhaled deeply, savoring the scent of salt and jasmine. 62 years old, slender, with brown hair streaked with silver, and eyes that had learned to see both beauty and betrayal, she felt a profound sense of liberation. Beside her, Emily, her 15-year-old granddaughter, bounced on her heels, curls glinting in the sunlight, emerald eyes wide with anticipation. Today was theirs alone, a day without schemes, without the shadows of past deceptions. Margaret's mind drifted briefly to the events that had brought them here. The hotel confrontation? The deactivated keycards? The confrontations that had revealed the depths of her children's duplicity. A pang of sorrow still lingered for the innocence lost in her grandchildren, but the satisfaction of standing firm, of claiming her dignity, provided a warm, steady counterpoint to the grief. She had learned that freedom and self-respect carried their own rewards, and now, as she watched Emily twirl in the sunlight, she understood that this was only the beginning. Emily, petite but resilient, wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and a loose white top with denim shorts. Her movements were quick, almost impatient with the world, yet deliberate when observing details others overlooked. Margaret had always admired her perceptiveness, her ability to notice what adults tried to hide. The events of the previous days had given Emily a first-hand lesson in integrity and courage. Margaret smiled as her granddaughter picked up a small pail and shovel, heading toward the sand, determined to create something magnificent. Margaret followed, feeling the warmth of the sand under her bare feet, the sun kissing her skin. "Remember, Emily," she said softly, "what we're building here isn't just sand. It's a reminder that even small acts can be beautiful when done with care, honesty, and patience." Emily nodded, scooping sand and carefully shaping a foundation for their castle. The rhythm of their work, digging, shaping, laughing, was meditative, almost healing. Margaret's heart, long burdened by the weight of betrayal and compromise, began to feel lighter. Each grain of sand, each tower built, seemed to symbolize her reclamation of self-worth. As the castle grew, so did the laughter and conversation between them. Margaret recounted stories from her youth, tales of misadventures with friends, quiet moments with her late husband, and lessons learned from mistakes. Emily listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting with questions or comments, her voice bright and curious. Margaret's voice carried authority tempered by warmth, the kind that comes from someone who has endured life's trials and emerged with both wisdom and tenderness. The sun climbed higher, painting the sky in soft shades of azure. A light breeze stirred, carrying the scent of ocean and salt-tanged wildflowers. Margaret paused, looking at Emily's focused face, the curls falling gently over her forehead, and felt a surge of protective affection. She realized that teaching Emily was as much about guidance as it was about sharing a moment of pure, untainted joy. Emily was learning that freedom and integrity were gifts, not burdens. She was learning that self-respect required courage, sometimes at the cost of comfort, but always worth the effort. Later, they wandered to a secluded spot along the shore, where the water lapped gently at the sand. Margaret found a smooth piece of driftwood and handed it to Emily. "Write your name in the sand, make it bold. Let it remind you that you have a voice, that your choices matter, and that standing for yourself is never wrong." Emily crouched down, tracing her name carefully, then looked up at Margaret with a grin that mirrored her own excitement. The small act felt monumental, a declaration of autonomy, a tiny yet significant rebellion against a world that sometimes demanded compliance at the cost of self. Afterwards, they returned to the hotel terrace, where Margaret brewed chamomile tea, letting the steam rise and swirl in the warm morning air. Emily sat cross-legged, diary in hand, jotting down reflections from the day. Margaret observed quietly, her heart swelling with pride and relief. This trip, this day, was about reclaiming moments lost to family strife and betrayal. It was about creating memories untouched by deception, where laughter and honesty formed the foundation of their shared experience. Margaret reflected on the lessons she had imparted. Freedom was not merely the absence of oppression. It was the ability to act with dignity, to enforce boundaries, to choose herself when necessary. Emily, perceptive and thoughtful, had witnessed these principles firsthand. Margaret felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that she had not only reclaimed her own agency, but had also modeled integrity for the next generation. Each smile, each careful movement of sand, each story shared, reinforced the lesson that life could be both joyful and principled. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, turning the sea to molten gold, Margaret prepared a simple dinner on the balcony. The soft clinking of plates and utensils blended with the rhythmic sound of waves, creating a symphony of tranquility. They ate slowly, savoring each bite, sharing stories, and occasionally bursting into laughter at small jokes or memories. Margaret noticed how Emily's posture relaxed, how her eyes sparkled with genuine delight, free from the tension and apprehension that had accompanied the previous hotel stay. Evening settled in, a warm orange fading into violet. Margaret sipped her tea, watching the horizon, feeling the wind tousle her silver-brown hair. Emily leaned against her side, sleepy but content, her curls smelling faintly of salt and sand. Margaret thought about her children back at the old hotel, grappling with their own remorse and confusion, and allowed herself a brief, reflective smile. She had chosen freedom, and in doing so, had given Emily a gift beyond measure, a first-hand lesson in courage, self-respect, and the beauty of authentic life. Before bed, they sat on the balcony, wrapped in light shawls as the night air cooled. Margaret spoke softly. "Emily, remember this feeling, the way it's just ours, untouched and honest. Carry it with you always." Emily nodded, resting her head against her grandmother's shoulder. "I will, Grandma. I promise." Margaret felt a profound peace settle over her, a rare tranquility that came from finally prioritizing herself, reclaiming control, and surrounding herself with honesty and love. As they turned in for the night, the gentle rhythm of waves lulling them toward sleep, Margaret felt a sense of completeness she had not known in decades. The past, with its betrayals and disappointments, seemed to settle behind her like distant clouds. The future, open and bright, awaited, a space where she could fully embrace her choices, her freedom, and her granddaughter's growth into a strong, principled young woman. Tonight, she had reclaimed her life. She had built a foundation not of compromise or falsehood, but of integrity, love, and autonomy. Margaret closed her eyes, a contented smile playing across her face, confident that this was truly a new beginning.